Good morning. Hope everybody had a wonderful July 4th yesterday. And not so much for the dogs, I think. Alfie had a pretty rough day because of the fireworks and all of that. He was pretty freaked out. One of my favorite, not TV shows, but favorite thing about July 4th is watching the Nathan's World Hot Dog Eating Championship. You guys watch that? That's amazing. Joey Chestnut has won it 18 times in a row. I mean, for 18 consecutive years, he has won the World Hot Dog Eating Championship. Yesterday, he ate 66 hot dogs. 66 hot dogs. 67. Okay. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Do you know how many hot dogs in the United States was consumed on July 4th each year? 150 million hot dogs. I don't know. We love our hot dogs. 150 million hot dogs is consumed on July 4th every year. That has nothing to do with my sermon this morning, but I just thought it was interesting. Just a little facts for you. You know, in 2008, our family entered one of the most important transitions in our lives. And after much prayer, I accepted a job in San Francisco. And it was an opportunity I believe God was leading us to. But by saying yes to that opportunity, it also came with significant sacrifices. Not just for me, but for the entire family. Joanna had to leave her teaching job that she has loved for almost 20 years. And our children had to leave their school, their friends, and everything that was familiar to them. We had to leave this church that has been home to us for 20 plus years at that time. We left behind our family, close friends, in a community that we have grown to love, and we left everything pretty much that felt comfortable, predictable, and safe was gone. To be honest, when we first got there in the Bay Area, the first couple of years was pretty difficult, particularly for me. I became so consumed at work with challenges and pressure that I couldn't really fully see that why God brought us there in the first place. Every day for me was a grind, and with new problems and challenges, I spent a lot of time focusing on the uncertainties of what was going on in front of me rather than the faithfulness of God around me. But while I was busy worrying about my circumstances, God was quietly at work in our family. You see, Joanna found a wonderful teaching job that she fell in love with. Our children began to flourish. They developed lifelong friendships. They excelled at school. They found new opportunities in sports and grew in ways that we could have never imagined. God surrounded us with incredible new friends. Church opened new doors for ministry opportunities. Some of those friendships that still bless us today and has shaped us in ways that simply would not have happened if we stayed where we are. Looking back, I can clearly see that while I was wrestling with uncertainty and challenges and the circumstances that I was marred in, God was building something new and beautiful in our family. He was writing a story that was far better than the one that I could have written myself. That experience taught me something that I'll never forget, and that is transformation in our lives does not always happen with immediate clarity. Often God is doing his greatest work in our lives quietly, patiently, faithfully, even in times when we cannot see it. God taught me during that time to stop looking backwards and stop focusing on my present challenges and problems. Instead, he invited me to trust him with what he was doing next in our lives. I found that God's timing was always perfect. He His thoughts are always higher than ours, and even when we cannot see it, God is still moving. He is still blessing. He is still transforming. And that is the exact same thing I see this church today. Last week, we studied the parable of the wedding feast. We discovered something remarkable about the heart of God, that God is a God who invites. God is a God who invites people into his kingdom. He invites people into a relationship with his Son and invites people to join him in his banquet feast. Remember that? I share that I believe Rooted Church is also entering into a new season. I believe God is calling us from gathering to going, from strengthening our roots to bearing fruit, from enjoying King's banquet by inviting others to the table with us. You see, whenever God calls his people into a new season, he always asks us to trust him. He always asks us to trust him. And that is exactly what is happening here as we see in Isaiah 43. In Isaiah 43. God's people were about to enter into a new chapter, but before they could embrace what God was about to do, they had to let go of where they have been. However, as we begin to remember a familiar story, we got to go back a little bit to Exodus chapter 13 and 14 as a little bit of a background for our story today in Isaiah 43. In Exodus 13 and 14, the Israelites has been in slavery for over 400 years in Egypt. They endured suffering and oppression, and yet in his perfect timing, God raised up Moses to lead his people out of slavery, out of Egypt, with a mighty hand and outstretched arm. God delivered them from their suffering. Through the desert and the wilderness, God guided the Israelites with a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. These symbolizes of God's presence, and reminding people that they were not alone, that God himself was leading them every step of the way. The journey took them to the shores of the Red Seas, and they were faced with what seemingly an impossible situation. I think we're all familiar with that story. Imagine the scene. There's a group. We're not talking about hundreds or thousands. We're talking about closely of 2 million people, newly freed, but with an uncertain future. Now, they're standing at the edge of the water. Behind them lies Egypt, a place of slavery, pain, and oppression that they cannot go back to. Ahead of them lies this vast, impassable Red Sea, a barrier to the freedom and the promise that God has spoken over them, the promised land on the other side. The past is no longer an option, but their future seems unreachable, blocked by this insurmountable obstacle of the Red Sea. To make it even worse, as they stand in confusion and in fear, what do they hear? They hear the sound of Pharaoh's chariots begin to rumble in the distance. The Israelites look back and see the Egyptian army pursuing them. They were trapped. They were in this in-between place with no way forward and no way back. The only thing they can see are danger, uncertainty, and the impossibility of their circumstances. In their moment of desperation, God reveals himself as the God of the impossible. What seems like the end became the beginning of a miracle. He parted the Red Sea, destroyed Pharaoh's army. The story reminds us that no barrier is too great for God. When fear and doubt surrounds us, God steps in the midst of that, proving that he is in control and his promises never fail. Brother and sister, have you ever had a moment of like that in your life? Where the obstacles in front of you seems impossible to overcome. God's message to us today is this: forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. God is still in the business of making a way when there's no way. His faithfulness is timeless, and his power to deliver is real today as real as it was real then. This incredible event of crossing the Red Sea became the cornerstone of Israel's faith, a reminder of God's faithfulness and deliverance. Now we go forward about 700 years. 700 years later, Israel now faces a new problem. Despite being God's chosen people, the Israelites now have turned away from God. They are falling into idolatry and immorality, ignoring warnings from the prophets. Remember, we talked about that last week, right? They persecuted and killed the prophets. Their disobedience led to devastating consequences because in 586 BC, the Babylonians under King Nebuchadnezzar invaded Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and exiled many of the Israelites back to Babylon into slavery. However, despite their disobedience, God did not abandon his people. Through the prophet Isaiah, he delivers this message of hope and restoration. That's where we are today in Isaiah 43. God reminds them that his unchanging faithfulness and promises to redeem them despite of their sins. God assures the Israelites a new beginning. He proclaims that he will make a way through the wilderness, that his words brings them the hope and assurance of his enduring love and power to transform their suffering into something brand new. So let's take a look at verse 14. Let's take a look at 14, Isaiah 43, 14. It says, "Thus say the Lord, your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. For your sake I have sent to Babylon, and I will bring them all down as fugitives, even the Chaldeans, into the ships in which they rejoice." This verse begins with a powerful reminder to the Jewish nation that God is the what? The Redeemer. The Redeemer. The word Redeemer here says it is one who has the right and authority to reclaim what rightfully belongs to him. To the Jewish people, this word carries significance, deep, deep significance. A redeemer is someone who delivers people from bondage, who makes a way where there seems to be no way, who steps into impossible situations and reclaims his people for himself. Here, God is speaking to the Israelites who are now exiled in Babylon as slaves. They're enslaved in a foreign land again. Just like 700 years before, they were in Egypt. They're again enslaved in a foreign land. But he promised to bring down their oppressors, the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, and crush the power that holds them captive. He assures them that just as he delivers them from Egypt, that he was going to do this again. Everybody with me? Okay. Some of us here really need to hear this today, right? Regardless of your past pains, your struggles, your relationships, or the isolation you might feel, that God is still your Redeemer today. The Spirit of God is saying that I am your Redeemer. I know the pain that you're going through right now, but I am about to bring it to an end. I am about to create a new beginning in you. Just as he promised the Israelites, God is promising you today that he will step into your situation, whatever hardship that you are enduring, whatever pain and frustration is wearing you down, that he will break the chains that bind you and lead you into freedom, restoration, and a new beginning. Now, after declaring what he will do in verse 14, in verse 15, God reestablishes his authority and reminds his people who he is. Verse 15 says, I am the Lord, your Holy One, the Creator of Israel, your King. Here, God proclaims 4 key aspects of his identity. He is the Lord, he is the Holy One, he is the Creator, and he is the King. Here he reassures the Israelites by reminding them of who he is. No matter the challenges they face, whether in exile, in despair, or uncertainty, they could trust in the God who redeems, who creates, who rules over them. This truth applies to us as well. Whether our church feels like it needs something new, or whether you are facing struggles in your own personal life. Maybe your marriage feels a little shaky. Maybe your job is unstable. Your business is uncertain. God's message remains the same, that I am yours. I am your Lord, the Holy One, your Creator, your King. No matter what you are going through, you are never without help because you belong to me. You know, for many of us, after walking with God for many, many years, it is possible to become familiar with him, but we lose the awe of God. We're so familiar with God, but we lose the awe of God. Everybody understand what I'm saying? We forget about his character, and we begin to take for granted who he is, what he's done for us. We forget the attributes of God because we get so comfortable with him. You know, it reminded me of something that we are seeing during the FIFA World Cup right now in North America. I don't know if you're a big social media follower, but social media right now is filled with visitors from around the world, sharing their experiences in the United States. These videos, they are marvel at the things that most of us hardly appreciate or notice anymore. We don't even notice it, right? Something simple as the excitement of going to a Costco, a Target, or a Walmart and seeing the abundance of choices and the things that you could buy. The generous portions at a restaurant, right? I saw a guy with a quesadilla the size of his face, and he was like, oh my goodness, look at this quesadilla, right? Or eating at a Chick-fil-A, simple chicken sandwich, or an In-N-Out burger, or a burrito off a food truck. Something so simple we take for granted. They are in awe of America and the food. What about this? The free refills. That cracks me up. The free refills, right? They go into a restaurant and they finish a cup of coffee and they pour them another one. They're like, what? I get a second one? Or a Coke. You want another Coke? You want another iced tea? Or go into In-N-Out that you can go to the fountain and get as many refills as you want. It blows their mind that they can actually do that here in the United States. Or how about complimentary chips and salsa? One guy walked into a Mexican restaurant. They served them complimentary chips and salsa. The guy says, I haven't even ordered yet. They already gave me food. What a country this is, right? We don't even think about that. We demand it here in the United States. We sit down in the Mexican restaurant. If a chips and salsa is not served within 1 minute, we get upset. But they're in awe. How about a glass of water? That was the one that blew me away, right? They served me water at a restaurant. I think in Europe, water is more expensive than wine, I think, in some places. Joanna was telling me, right? She was in Spain. In some places, you can buy wine more cheaper than water. Or something simple as just having air conditioning everywhere they go. They were blown away. Oh my gosh, the stadium is air conditioned. Well, your Walmart is air conditioned, restaurants air conditioned. In Europe, air conditioning is not a thing. It's I don't know, it's optional. I mean, I saw something, a statistics pretty staggering as I'm looking through this sermon, researching that over 150,000 people in Europe die every year of heat. Some of the most vulnerable, the elderly, die of heat because there's no air conditioning in many places. Anyway, look it up, Google it. It's crazy, right? So these foreigners that come to America for the first time, experiencing things that we have taken for granted, to speak about this with amazement, about the beauty, the choices, the generosity, and the freedom they experience here in America. It's wonderful to see. But have you ever asked the question, why? Why are they seeing this? Why are they so surprised? Because they are seeing things with a fresh eyes when many of us has become so accustomed to it and we take it for granted. Sometimes it takes an outsider to remind us how special and blessed we really are. It's the same thing with Israel. Israel has become so accustomed of being God's covenant people that they had lost their sense of awe and wonder of God. They no longer stood in awe of the God who had redeemed them, delivered them, and faithfully provided for them. For many of us that walking with God for so long, we can sometimes become comfortable with our Christian life that we lose sight of the magnitude of who God is. We forget that he is the Lord, the one who reigns over all, who orchestrates every details of our salvation. That he is the Holy One, who is perfect, set apart, who walks with us and leads us through his Spirit. That he is the Creator who formed us with purpose and intention. Who goes before us, stands behind us, and surrounds us with his presence. And he is the King who rules with authority and grace, who brought us into his kingdom, not by our own doing, but through his invitation alone. That is our God. Isaiah 43, 16 and 17 says this. This is what the Lord says, who made a way through the seas, a path through the mighty waters, who drew out the chariots and horses, the army and reinforcements together. And they lay there, never to rise again, extinguished, snuffed out like a wick. Here, Isaiah calls upon the most defining moment in Israel's history, the crossing of the Red Sea. He reminds the Israelites, this is 700 years later, he reminds them that the account of Exodus, what God did to part the waters and allow the people to cross safely when the pursuing Egyptian army was swept away. This was a moment when God's power and faithfulness was shown to his people, forever establishing him as the deliverer. Isaiah brings up this event to draw parallel to their current situation, the circumstances that they're in, as they are again in exile, right? So just as God delivers the Israelites from bondage in Egypt, he reminds them that he is the same God who is going to deliver them from their present troubles in Babylon. This message is clear. God's power and faithfulness is not confined by time, that he is unchanging. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and he remains active in our lives constantly. As we reflect on this passage, sometimes I was convicted to really consider the question, what reminder of God's faithfulness do we remember and do we need in our lives? In this new season, provides us with a moment to pause and reflect on the way God has been present in our own stories. I don't know about you, but think back maybe through a difficult challenge that you've overcome, an unexpected blessing that maybe had come your way, or a season of growth and change, or challenges that has made you better. These moments are like pillars in our journey of faith, evidence of God's provision, guidance, and protection in our lives. For us as a family, the journey has not been easy, but through trials, God has been shaping a new beginning for us. I think back of 2020, 2021, those are some of the most difficult years that we have ever faced as a family. First, we lost my father-in-law, Pastor Chen, Joanna's father, suddenly passed away. A loss that devastated our family. Joanna and I were in Northern California at the time, in the middle of the COVID lockdown, unable to fully be here to grieve alongside our loved ones. And the sorrow and pain of his passing were immense. Not just for us, but for the entire church. A community that had lost their pastor, their mentor, and a friend. Just a few months later, we faced with another heartbreak as my mother entered into hospice care at home. We did everything possible to care for her. We cooked her favorite meal, feeding her, just sitting beside her to watch her breathe through a machine that sustained her. Those final moments were filled with pain, and it became sacred memories for our family as we watch her decline. You know, I really deeply appreciate Joanna during that time because she was working full-time and took on the incredible sacrifice of sleeping downstairs every night with my mother to provide constant care for her during her final days. My mother passed away in February 2021, surrounded by family, and my mother went home to be with the Lord. As heartbreaking as that season was, it also became a catalyst for something we never expected. Through the pain, God planted a burden in our hearts to return to Southern California after nearly 15 years away. We felt that God was calling us back, not just to process our loss, but to rebuild, to reconnect, and embrace a new season of life with our family. Now, as we're back here in Southern California, here at this church, we see how God's hand was guiding us all along. That in the midst of our heartbreak, that he was already making a way. Today, we experience the unexpected joy of deep fulfillment of being together as a family. And back here at this church, our spiritual home for over 30 years, God is faithful in sustaining us and creating something new, even in our darkest moments. This is our testimony, our family's testimony, that through loss, that he has brought renewal, that through sorrow that he has given joy, that through triumph he has written a new beginning for our family. Just as Isaiah reminded the Israelites of the Red Sea, we must anchor ourselves in the assurance of God's faithfulness. These reminders are not stories from the past. They are evidence that God, who works miracles then, is still active today in our lives. And just as he calls his people to look forward to a new thing he is about to do, he calls us to trust that he is still leading us into a new season of growth, renewal, and blessing. This reminder of God's past deliverance for the Israelites serves as a foundation for the hope in the following verses. By recalling the Exodus experience, prepare the Israelites to embrace a new thing. Isaiah 43:18 and 19. He says, "Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." In these verses, Isaiah calls the Israelites to shift their focus. He reminds them to forget the former things, to not to dwell on the past. Now, this is really important. This is not a call to forget God's faithfulness or the lessons that they have learned, but rather is an encouragement to release the weight of past mistakes, regrets, and even painful memories of their exile, that God is inviting them into something new, a transformative future free from burden of their past. At the heart of this passage, God declares, "See, I am doing something new." A promise that God is actively working and bringing change and renewal. If we go back to the previous slide, the verse, a key word here is, "I am doing a new thing now." Now. This is an important word, right? The word "now" emphasizes the immediacy of his action, reminding us that God's work is not confined to a distant future, but is unfolding in the present moment, right now. Even when we cannot fully see it, God is already at work, moving in ways that transcends our own understanding. The imagery of making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland is a picture of God's ability to provide direction, sustenance, and refreshment in the most barren challenges of circumstances. Just as a path in the wilderness guides the lost, and streams in the wasteland brings life to dry land, desolate places, God promised to lead his people and renew them in the most difficult seasons. You know, as we gather each Sunday, as I look out, I don't see barren wilderness anymore. I see signs of new life. I see God bring together people from different backgrounds, different generations, different stories into one church family. I see friendships forming. I see faith growing. I see a community that genuinely care and love for one another. We're still a small congregation, but we are a vibrant one. And I believe these are the signs that God is doing a new thing. He promised us that. He's preparing us not simply to enjoy his blessing, but become a blessing to others. Our passage today is a passage of hope, of renewal, of trusting God for what is to come. God calls us to trust in his ongoing work in our own lives and in our church. He is always doing something new, inviting us to let go of the past and step into the future he is creating for us. Many years ago, after my father passed away, I went through one of the most difficult seasons of my personal life. Grief has a kind of way of keeping our eyes fixed on the past, you know. You replay conversations, remember what once was, and wonder if life will ever feel the same. One day during that season, Joanna sent me an email at work, and it contains these words. Do we have that slide? No? Yeah. At a funeral, share stories done. We were talking about years back how wonderful those years were, that our English congregations was thriving, that families filled the center in youth ministry. I saw a picture the other day of amazing things. But as I reflect on those conversations, I sense a question. The question was, Byron, do you believe what is behind you is the very best that I have for this church? Let me say that again. Do you believe what is behind you is the best that I have for this church? Do you believe you have experienced before? Church, I believe God is asking us that same question today, that do we believe our best days are behind us? Or do we believe that God who made a way through the Red Sea, that God who brought his people home from Babylon, that God who raised Jesus from the dead is still doing a new thing today among us? I believe he is. Isaiah says, forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. God is not asking us to forget his faithfulness. We should celebrate every story of his goodness, but he's asking us not to become so focused on the past, whether our greatest success or our deepest failure, that we miss what he's about to do in us. This week, as I studied this passage, I can't help to think about my own story as well. I don't know if I've ever shared this on a pulpit. You see, I immigrated to this country when I was 11 years old from Taiwan. I didn't speak a word of English. I looked different and I dressed differently. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. Middle school at that time was incredibly difficult because I was Chinese. During the 90s, every kid assumed the Chinese kid knew Kung Fu. So I often became the target of teasing and fights all the time. I ate lunch by myself most days, and every afternoon it's this yellow bus will come pick me up and take me to another middle school for ESL classes. I remember getting off the bus and running through their lunch area, having food thrown at me and being mocked because I was Chinese and simply looked different. And I would always wonder why my parents brought me to America in the first place. High school wasn't much better. I had this tremendous need to belong. I made poor choices. I hung out with the wrong crowd. There were drugs and alcohol, parties, and decisions that I'm not proud of. I attended church every week, but I didn't know Jesus personally at all. My faith belonged to my parents. It was not yet my own. I was such a poor student in high school, I graduated with a 1.7 grade point average. I had disappointed my parents, but more importantly, I disappointed myself. Community college was my only option. Not like many smart kids today really make smart decision to go to a community college to save a bunch of money, right? Instead of going to a four-year university, I had to go to University of Walnut because that was my only option. Mount Sac. So I had to learn to study. I had to learn how to study all over again. I had to teach myself how to learn. It wasn't easy. I struggled, but little by little, God began to change my life. He gave me a hunger to learn, a new purpose, a new community of faithful people that surrounded me, and eventually also a calling to serve him in church. By God's grace, I was able to transfer to a four-year university, and I graduated. And I went on to spend 35 years, a career in higher education in various capacities. God blessed me with an amazing wife, an incredible family, friendships and opportunities that I never could have imagined as a child. I often ask this question, how did I get here? How did I get here? By the world's standards, a kid with my background who barely speaks English, who was picked on every day, a terrible student with all my mistakes and failures, probably should be standing here today. But God had a different story to write. He was shaping me, molding me, and creating something far greater than I could have ever imagined in my life. This is what I have learned after walking with Jesus all these years. You're a young person out there. I say you take out a pen, you write these 3 things down I'm about to share with you. Write this down. These are the things I've learned. That your past circumstances do not determine your future. Your past failures do not define your identity. Your mistakes do not shape who you become. I'm going to let that sit there for a second. Write it down. When God steps into your life, he has a way of redeeming what seems broken, restoring what seems lost, and write a story far more beautiful than you can ever write for yourself. That is exactly what Isaiah is reminding Israel. And I believe that is exactly what God is reminding us today. The God who says, forget the former things, is the same God who also says, see, I am doing a new thing. I look around this church. I see a church coming alive. I see people growing in Christ. I see a community that genuinely love one another. We may be small, but we are vibrant. We are healthy. I believe God is preparing us for something even greater. The great missionary Hudson Taylor once said this: God's work done in God's way will never lack God's supply. Our God is still Jehovah Jireh. He is still our provider. He is still making a way where there seems to be no way. Brothers and sisters, I believe that we are entering into a new season. Our best days are not behind us, not because of who we are, but because who God is. God is not finished with us yet. I believe he is just getting started. So I ask that as a church that we embrace the new things that he is doing in us. And that we have eyes to see it, hearts to believe it, and the courage to follow Jesus wherever he leads. Amen? Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for reminding us